There we go.
Okay, cool. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, rad. So, yeah, thanks for everybody's flexibility. It was actually due to my schedule that we had to bump this from the usual 1 o'clock slot. Um, and I'm here with our special guest, Ciara, who introduced herself a moment ago, but um, I'm gonna provide some context of like what we're up to over here with our diversion program pilot at Beaverton Municipal Court to give you kind of the context for then what you're probably most interested in, which is her segment that'll follow mine about our data collection and what we're hoping to achieve and how she's been helping us set a foundation for that. Um, with the share screen function, I know sometimes I can't see like chats, so I think we're enough of an informal group. Like, you can take yourself off mute if you want to ask something, or we'll have plenty of time, I think, for like Q&A and any kind of discussion or things that it sparks that you want to add in about how you all are doing stuff, because I think ultimately we're all trying to learn from each other. Um, yeah, bear with me for a little bit while I kind of explain what we're doing, and then I'll pass to you, Kira. Do you want to say anything up front, first, Kira, before I dive in?
No, I think you're good to go.
Okay, cool. All right. Like I said, the hope is I'm going to give you a little intro or reminder of who we are as Center for Mediation and Dialogue, kind of the backdrop, and then we'll talk about the diversion program, and then I'll pass so that you can hear more about the data collection strategy. And then I don't at all imagine that we'll get anywhere near that 90-minute mark of our meeting, so we'll have plenty of time to chat until folks are feeling like a natural wrap up. Okay. This is just, I know there's some new faces for me on this chat, but the Center for Mediation and Dialogue, like I said, we're housed at the City of Beaverton. We're in the Equity Division, and even more broadly than this specific program that I'll talk about, we provide conflict resolution and RJ services, as well as kind of general education. Um, to City of Beaverton and with some of our programs more broadly in Washington County. So we're one of the resolution organ centers, the CDRCs, like Scott, many of the others that we all partner with. We've been around since 1988. That's when our flagship mediation program began. So we have a long history, and then RJ services kind of came along about 10 years ago. We have 4 full-time staff and about 40 volunteers, although that number is boosting up thanks to our recent efforts. That's across all our programs. So that would include mediators and RJ facilitators. And 500 cases a year, that's not RJ, that's like everything all combined, including all the different types of mediation cases. And that's just our mission statement down there. Okay. And this slide is again just kind of the variety of services that we offer, and then we're going to do a deep dive on the latest one that we're trying to put in motion under the RJ category. Okay, so last year, we were awarded one of the small dollar like planning grants from the CJC, and that kind of launched us into what has now been like a year plus planning process with some of the folks. So to give you a little bit of context, I'm a city employee. My Center for Mediation and Dialogue colleagues are city employees, and we have our own city Beaverton Municipal Court. So when the opportunity came up for like the shorter term planning period for RJ diversion or deflection program, there had kind of been a history of us talking with the presiding judge more informally, like see them in passing, them saying like, "Oh, I had this case the other day. Like, wow, the victim seemed interested, Oh, I love RJ. We should do something, But it was always kind of in passing and no like formal process had materialized, but we knew that there was openness from the presiding judge around restorative justice programming. So when the opportunity came up, we decided, hey, what would it look like if city employees, right, municipal court, collaborated with another city program, aka us, as a service provider. So we band together with the goal of creating a new diversion pathway. You're seeing there that the planning process has heavily involved a presiding judge, our city prosecutor at municipal court, a court administrator, that's the person who oversees all the court staff that are doing the day-to-day administration and face-to-face with defendants as they're showing up, a victim services staff, a public defender who has a contract with municipal court to provide their services, and a city attorney, meaning not the city prosecutor, but because we're a city, we have city attorneys who are looking out like legally for the city. Um, so that was kind of like our internal like city staff team of people that said, I'm committed to being a part of this planning process. Um, One of the reasons why our Beaverton Municipal Court is a good partner in this respect is that they were already engaged in like award-winning programming and kind of forward-thinking diversion processes. Um, they've received like mentor court status because of their specialty courts. Be Sober is one of them, which is like a DUI diversion pathway. They also are really proud that they started a behavioral health court, and they said that they're the first in the state at a municipal court level to employ a mental health specialist at the court. So um, they have a history of being kind of open-minded to ways to best serve the folks coming through their purview. So um, they've been a good partner because they've had like open-mindedness, I would say, along the way. As part of our planning process, like I said, we formed that working group who I told you who that's made up. Um, Last year, my colleague, many of you know Carly, who manages our program, and I, the presiding judge and the city prosecutor, all traveled to Colorado and did a learning trip. That was funded through our planning grant. We ended up visiting 6 court-connected programs. As many of you know, like Colorado is sometimes uh, held up as like a really high standard in RJ implementation. They're definitely ahead of Oregon when it comes to integration of RJ practices at courts, at schools, probably community studies too, but I just don't know about those as much. So we were able to base ourselves in Denver and within this like, 2-hour radius, visit a lot of programs. The benefit of that was we got to visit, and the majority of those programs were municipal court connected, which was really important for our judge and our prosecutor to be able to connect with like people they saw as colleagues working at their same level within the justice system. Um, and we got to see like different models, like some doing diversion like through the city prosecutor's office, some doing deflection at like police level. And we got to hear about their successes of those programs that have been operational, and we got to, also hear about like their challenges and words of wisdom to us as we were getting off the ground. What I will say about that is like, our trip to Colorado was in no way to negate like programs like you all or others who weren't able to make it today and like the amazing RJ stuff that we would want to highlight in our own state. I do think the trip allowed us to connect with multiple municipal court connected RJ programs, as well as you all know when you travel with people, the relationship building you get to do and the like conversations that happen after the meetings and things like that. I think that allowed for like a great foundation between our program staff and the presiding judge and city prosecutor, which was pretty cool. Because then our task was to come back to Beaverton and have those monthly meetings with the working group, so including those people who didn't get to travel, and try to map out and distill down like, hey, this is what we learned from the trip. Now let's discuss how these things would play out in our own context. Um, so as you can imagine, I'm sure this is similar to the planning processes that you all went through when you were designing and developing your RJ interventions and kind of how your referral stream would go. But this has kind of been the focus of the working group. So a lot of conversations around what would eligibility criteria look like, a lot of legal considerations, big debates between are we doing diversion or deflection? Um, what does that referral pipeline look like? And like victim engagement, were we only going to be involved when victims expressed an interest? Were we going to allow for a victim veto, meaning like a defendant couldn't go through an RJ process if the victim wasn't on board? All these kind of different debates. Obviously, Carly and I were the serving as like the restorative practices uh, implementation partner. So we already had like ideas around that, but we were trying to develop most things by consensus with that working group. And I'll tell you in a few minutes kind of what some of those decisions out of that process was. We also, as I mentioned, that working group, the one strength, right, is that we're all city staff. So guess what? I get to see their calendars and schedule meetings. I can Teams chat them, all these kind of different things that meant we all could commit to like a more in-depth planning process. As of 2 days ago, we've met 13 times as a group and chat a lot in between and exchange information between that time or collaborate on action items. But we obviously, the weakness of that was we needed more buy-in and input from outside voices, right? Not just city staff. So we did hold two what we called community advisory sessions. So we had like social service agencies, some community-based organizations that we partner with in other ways, but we hadn't, brought into our RJ discussions. Some folks we were already partnering with because of our juvenile department um, victim offender dialogue work that were kind of connected through that way that we thought could advise us. We invited some of our RJ colleagues from around the state to join to like be other RJ input and voices. We had some public defenders invited. We had mental health folks invited. We had the court look at like common victims, so some um, store like box store or retail folks that are often victims, like they're, what do they call them? Is it theft prevention folks or, like those kind of people came to give input. Um, we had some city colleagues who are involved in more social service kind of areas come. So that was cool that we walked away with some of their input. It was like earlier in our design process, and we also felt great about their level of excitement about this expansion in programming. Um, yeah, and then lots of debate in the working group around what like the parameters would look like around like accountability or contract agreements, just because we saw different examples when we visited different programs. Some of them had like plug and play, like these are your menu of things, like check it off. Other ones had like set numbers of agreements or lens through which they, had that brainstorm discussion. So yeah, lots of conversation around that. And then definitions of like what would success look like, what would data tracking look like, and we'll get into that later in our discussion today. So no lack of things to talk about. I think we've learned the benefit of a slower planning process, a more deliberate, kind of collaborative one where um, we definitely feel like our referral partners have been very close to the decision making, and that even if we were like maybe disagreeing on our ideal answers to certain questions, we all know how we got to like our at least our starting answer, you know? So I think there's like a real strength in that and a high level of comfort in terms of our ability to like ask questions of each other, even like push or challenge each other, or be curious about the other's perspective. So we feel lucky in that regard. Okay, so now giving you, that was a little bit on like, hey, what's our planning process look like? It's taken longer than we've expected. We also think like amazing that we had that time. Our planning process has extended into our like implementation CJC grant partner, relationship. Um, but we're hopeful that some of that deliberation and collaboration will pay off in the long run. Okay, so kudos to my colleague Carly for creating this beautiful flow chart. But this is to give you a sense of like the quote unquote life of a case that will go through this RJ diversion. So I guess to say that up front, we did land on a diversion model, meaning things will like be referred through the city attorney's office. So it won't be at the level of, I know some of you all are doing deflection at the police level before it even touches any kind of court process. You're seeing some court language in here because it will be a diversion process where folks will go to first appearance. They'll learn that they've met eligibility criteria, and then they'll be invited to sign up for what we're calling an orientation session with CMD folks. So they'll have the opportunity to come to an in-person or a Zoom orientation session to learn more about what opting into the RJ diversion program would look like. Um, Court staff really like motivated us to hold these sessions. We're going to hold them 2 times a month because they didn't want to rely upon 100% defense attorney knowledge of like what that would involve, or like rely on that everyone would read the brochure thoroughly before they opt in. So they'll come to like an orientation session, and then when they would like officially opt in to the diversion program would be at their pretrial conference. So that's where a plea would be negotiated to do the RJ diversion. Well, then they would officially get the referral. They would go through our process within the end goal of a dismissal of their case. So this whole time, after someone opts in, we're working on a 6-month timeline with the knowledge that RJ service provider, aka us, is able to tell the prosecution office if we need more time to extend. But according to state statute, no one would have more than a year. But we're hoping that the vast majority will be able to complete it within that 6-month window. You'll also see on here that after lots of discussion, we did decide a couple things related to victim engagement. So, one, we decided to go with a referral stream that is not dependent upon victim interest or involvement. So, it means like a whole tranche of cases would be eligible, like from the defendant perspective, on their participation in a restorative process with a victim opt-in for participation. So you'll see that our process may or may not include victim participation. And you'll also see here that the victim services staff over at the court will be reaching out to victims to let them know that a defendant in their case is eligible for the program. And we do, as it currently stands with our launch coming up, that there is going to be a victim opt-out. So we had lots of robust debate. We saw programs doing it different ways, but at least here at the beginning, so this isn't like if a victim doesn't want to participate, someone couldn't go through. It just means if a victim strongly objects to the defendant in their case having that opportunity, then the city attorney is most likely going to not proceed with that eligibility. So we think that that's going to happen in a very small number of cases. We think actually uh, that victim engagement historically has been kind of low with the municipal court. So I think more often than not, we're just going to be dealing with the majority of cases where there won't be any victim participation. So we did our design according to that history. But we do hope that sometimes a victim will opt in who wants to participate. Okay, we move on. So participant eligibility, like I said, the city attorney will review for the program. We have this kind of long official document that they're using for eligibility criteria. Through our conversations, lots of municipal court um, it's all misdemeanor cases. That's just how municipal court works. Will be eligible. And then there's kind of different things around other considerations, but we were successful in expanding the criteria from there is like a current city attorney diversion that's not RJ, but it's like, do community service pay this fine, right, to resolve your case? We were able to expand the criteria for our RJ diversion track from that. So that's exciting. Um, it'll be a voluntary process, as I'm sure you all operate the same as well, and an official agreement to participate. And like I said, we'll do that info session so that hopefully people are getting questions answered and able to be kind of fully able to conceptualize what their participation would involve. I won't leave this up very long because I think this is very similar to other RJ programming, but we'll have initial meetings here. That top stuff is like what's the goal, no matter who you're doing that initial meeting with. Um, but having the chance to talk to the responsible party, you're just seeing municipal court language here with defendant, but kind of that preparatory conversation, rapport building, getting them to kind of think through what that second meeting will look like, and helping them feel prepared. When there is victim participation, we'd be doing similarly that facilitator conversation with them and potentially a support person. In the absence of that, we'll be engaging what we're calling community representatives, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we're using the community conferencing model. So, like I said, because we wanted to accept more cases in circumstances where a victim's not interested, a new addition to our program has been recruiting and training up what we're calling these community reps. So I know many of you work with folks in similar roles. For us, this was a new addition because in our prior existing RJ work, we were only doing direct victim offender dialogue with juvenile cases. Now we're incorporating in this community rep role. So we trained up interested community members in RJ fundamentals, and then they'll sit in as kind of with like dual hat, right? Like concerned about the impact that the harm has caused, and also like supportive of the responsible party in moving forward in a positive way and offering them support as a community member as well. They'll be um, participating in that conversation using like listening skills, trying to, hold back judgments, um, asking, questions, offering perspective on like collective needs or impacts or what they're hearing. Um, they'll be promoting, accountability measures that are not punishment oriented, but have a connection back to what happened or is strengths based. So they will be a consensus partner for accountability commitments, both in like the brainstorm and um, agreement of what those look like, along with the responsible party. And then at the conference, this is just like a visual what it might look like. The purple victim and victim support person may or may not be there. Our facilitators work in pairs. I think that's similar to what you all do. So this is just like a little bit of a visual there. And then I think this is very similar. This is like RJ 101. So these are kind of the components that would be happening in a community conference. So the opening, storytelling, impact sharing, discussing repairing harm, writing up the agreement, and the closing. So the responsible party would walk away from that community conference with their action items that they need to complete that have been developed in that meeting by consensus. We know like a lot of feedback from the defense attorney on our working groups, like people just want to know what they're going to be asked to do. Now you all know, right? That that's like really challenging in an RJ process because the process itself and the conversation reveals a lot, and then people respond to like what the needs are that have been raised. So we we're trying to give some examples to people so they can at least like conceptualize what kinds of things, maybe have come up um, in other RJ processes. Um, but, of course, we want like the smart, measurable, actionable, realistic, timely, uh, agreements to be written up like that. We want them to feel like there's creative or flexible ideas welcome. Um, at least with our starting out, we took this advice from one of the programs that we visited and remained connected to give like it'll be like 3 to 5 commitments. Um, and we're hoping that folks with this like 6 month timeline that after they do the community conference, that the agreements, wouldn't take more than like 3 months for them to complete, just knowing the timeline that we're working with over at the courts. And then you'll see examples here. This is all very much in your RG practitioner wheelhouse, but um, and then I think many of you are doing this, but this was not something that we had previously done in our direct victim offender dialogue with the juvenile department, but now are saying, is a step in our process with the municipal court cases with adults. But we want to have a closing circle. So at that conference, depending on what those agreements are and what it's looking like for how long it might take someone, we want to put the tentative date on the calendar. And then staff or volunteers would be checking in with the responsible party, like, hey, is that looking on track? Are you completing those items? But basically, for anyone who is at the conference to be invited to a closing circle where the person can report back on how those action items went, and have hopefully, a celebration and self-reflection on what that's looked like. That could also serve as a time where maybe there was some troubleshooting that needed to happen, more encouragement for the person to keep going to complete their tasks, or maybe something happened logistically that meant an idea couldn't be actualized and they ended up doing something else. This would be the group that kind of gives the like, okay, like you've completed the process, or oh, one little thing went wrong, but you did this other thing, the spirit of it was completed. And then after that, we'd be giving notification to the court that the person completed the RJ diversion process from our program service perspective, and then the prosecutor would be dismissing the case. Okay. Yay, I think I finally get to pass it.
Perfect. And I'll just tell you when to next slide if that
Oh,
works for
great.
you.
That's perfect.
Perfect. All right. So my name is Ciara McGlynn, and I work with the Center for Public Service at Portland State University. And I've been working on this project with Chris Campbell, who is the director of the Criminal Justice Policy Research Institute, CJPRI. I feel like I learned an acronym and then forget what it means and back and forth. Um, in the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Portland State. And my background's actually in treatment courts and diversion. So restorative justice is adjacent, and it was exciting to be brought onto a project before the court starts, because that's something I have not been able to do before. Usually it's working with a court that has an active program. So it feels kind of like choose your own adventure. There's like so many options for data. So just really briefly, setting it within restorative justice research broadly, there's definite evidence out there supporting restorative justice, especially focused on kind of the face-to-face conferencing. But there is variation across the research in specific settings, program models. It's very prevalent in the juvenile sector, less so in the adult, but there's still a lot of research out there with some mixed findings, but overall relatively positive findings. Where our project with Beaverton kind of sits is um, local in the United States prosecutor referred diversion is largely understudied. And the one thing we really wanted to do coming into this program was that it's really difficult, I'm sure you all know, working in restorative justice, to separate the program's effect from those who choose to participate in the program. And so you can take a pre and post survey of participants or of the I'm doing the acronym thing again, responsible party, RP. Um, and so you can see kind of a, a change across the program, but you can't say causally that it's a change, um, which I will get into in just a minute. I feel like it's easier to explain with a chart. But the main thing is really focusing on separating motivation from the program, from the people, um, with the research. And you can go to the next slide. So working with Beaverton, we really wanted to focus on having a rigorous comparison design in the diversion program prior to the program starting and establishing comparison groups. So where we're at right now is Amy and Carly have been working to uh, have the pre-survey filled out by individuals that would be eligible for the program. It just doesn't exist yet. So we're really trying to get at that piece that's hard to capture when you have an active court. The only way to really do that is a randomized control trial, which is kind of the gold standard of research. And that's telling one person, you go to the program, you go to court as usual. And so with this, our comparison group are people who could, in theory, do and are motivated to do the restorative justice diversion. The program just doesn't exist yet. And then we're also doing pre and post data on participants. So once the court starts, individuals who go through both the responsible party and harmed party. And then with the comparison group, we're doing a propensity score matching to kind of isolate the program's effect, which I will explain a little bit more in detail. And please ask questions if you have any, or we could get to them at the end. Propensity score matching took me quite a long time to learn. And so I can hope I can do it justice in explaining it, but it can be kind of a confusing thing without visuals and whatnot. So we can go to the next slide. So kind of thinking of that chart Amy showed earlier, I was thinking about it's such a good chart. I was thinking about using it and just adding stars to it. But this is a look at what we're trying to measure at different points in the court. So as I mentioned before the program even launches, we're trying to do the responsible party comparison survey. So it's going to be the same with a few tweaks as the intake pre-survey. And then administrative records like the current charge. And then once the program starts, we'll be doing the same survey with actual participants under the responsible party at that intake conference at the start of it, and pairing that with administrative records as well for formal charge and things like that, as well as the harm party um, pre-restorative justice survey. And as Amy said, um, we're not positive about the harm party and how many and all of that. So it's kind of a learning experience as we're going with the data collection. Then looking at the effects of the community conference specifically, the responsible party, the harmed party, and then community rep facilitator are all going to be filling out post surveys about the experience of the community conference itself. And then we'll also look at the conference documentation, what they signed on to do. And then at the final hearing dismissal, we are hoping to have the responsible party and the harm party fill out a post survey, which is really that pre-survey that they filled out at intake again at the end to see things like well-being and attitudes and how those might shift through the program. And then 3 months later, this is kind of we've gone back and forth on it a bit because it is a difficult thing to collect, but we're going to give it our best go at a responsible party long-term follow-up survey and a harm party long-term follow-up survey. So trying to get their contact information and reach out to them in 3 months about how they felt and those attitudes and well-being, as well as then pairing it with formal recidivism data. You can go to the next slide.
Mm,
Yeah, Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, probably on that slide just before. Well, I
Can
had
go
two
back.
questions, but one of them was, wow, you figured out a way to get long-term follow-ups complete. And so we'll
No,
see.
we have not. And that's
Uh-huh.
something we've gone back and forth, and we're like, we're gonna go for it,
Yeah, go for it.
see
Awesome.
what we can get.
Yep, I can't wait to hear from you in a year about how you cracked that. That's awesome.
Or didn't crack it, but
Yeah, that's great. The other thing, just before this slide, actually, you mentioned um, the question of how to locate causality and it being really tricky because it's possible that the people who opt for the program are, to a large extent, people who might be less likely to reoffend in the future or might be more at a point of being able to make some reforms and changes. The one other confounding factor that I usually hear about is selection bias by the whoever is in charge of offering the opportunity. So, is it possible in the thing that you all have set up to track how many people are offered the diversion and decide not to take it?
yes, that's definitely something we have considered, and I'll let Amy chime in just a second. But with my background in treatment courts in particular, too, the prosecutor decision, I think, is always an important thing to look at. And it's something we've chatted about, kind of having the prosecutor document that
Mhm.
process. But it's nothing solidified yet. And I'll let Amy jump in as well.
So we'll have, I mean, the working group like came to consensus, obviously heavily influenced by like what the prosecutor was and wasn't willing, right, to do. But
Mhm.
we do have like documented like, okay, this is the eligibility criteria that he's looking for because we're at this phase where we're doing this, we're not quite ready to launch, but we're Carly and I are showing up at arraignments to catch the
Okay.
people who the prosecutor is saying is eligible, and then basically the judge, like when they're called up, it's a very quick process, but it's like this is the charge against you. Do you understand? This is how you get your public defender that you qualify for. You're going to meet them out in the hall. And by the way, um, there's a program that could help defendants like you in the future. We're looking to collect, input around that and survey collection. Are you willing to fill that out? It might help others like you in the future. And then they're saying answering the judge like yes or no, I'm willing to fill that out. If they say yes, then they're like, raise your okay, and yeah, and then like Carly or I was like, hi, we got the clipboard. And then when they walk out of the courtroom, there's like a little bench waiting area, and they're filling that out. So what I will say is, this has only been the last like 3 weeks that we've been at this stage to do that. But it means that normally like the Friday before, because Mondays happen just to be your arraignment day, the prosecutor is emailing us and saying, okay, this is name, charge, name.
Wow.
So we're getting a preview that's actually going to help us with our planning for in a few months when we're ready to say go, because we're getting a preview of like, so I guess what I will say is if suddenly we're operational and then it's like crickets, we're going to be like, hey, how is that? Because, right, you were screening people eligible in this like.
Does does eligible mean offered, essentially?
So eligible means that then from there, like, okay, they would go to the orientation session and then presumably be meeting with their defense attorney, right? Maybe they decide they're going to fight
Yeah.
the charge, maybe whatever. Maybe they decide they don't like the sound of
Yeah.
the thing. So it's, some percentage then would opt in that would be
Hmm.
lower than, but we're going to know, what do you want to say? We're going to know who's like screened eligible, then who came to the orientation session, and then we get the official referral. So we'll probably see that attrition, like
Yeah.
we'll be able to know what that was.
Yeah. I mean, it would be awesome if you have so much cooperation that you can track outcomes for people who did the program, people who were eligible but didn't enter, and people who were screened ineligible. Yeah.
Can I ask you a clarifying question? I thought Scott's question was going this direction, but it was different. So when you talk about the prosecutor screening, we have a lot of programs, obviously, that they screen for. Is there criteria? Do you have criteria, or maybe I missed it already, of what they're screening in and out specifically? Like, for example, there's programs here at our court where, like community court, for example, if they have certain types of a record of certain things, or there's any type of certain types of crimes, they will be, the prosecutors will screen them out because they do not feel like they're appropriate or eligible. And those are kind of agreed upon prior to, or we have an idea. And then, of course, they can always object. So I'm just wondering, do you guys is there any criteria, or is it just anybody, whether there's person to person or violence or anything, are eligible for the program?
No, you're correct. There's like established eligibility for this RJ diversion, which is more expansive than what they've previously had for what they called CA diversion, which was like pay this fine, do this community service right, but there's not like a RJ programmatic element, right? So broader than that, but yes, they have ruled out some charges because of either other programmatic options, like for example, like a DUI is like goes to this other specialty court, or there's a behavioral health court, so that might go over there, or certain charges that they said they wouldn't accept at this time, right, for this type of thing. In the prior existing CA diversion, they looked at 10 years of criminal history, and if there was anything they weren't eligible, through our discussion with the group and deliberation around that, that will not automatically be a disqualifier. So we found that to be a success. So different things like that, the group discussed. And then, we're starting with where we are now, which is an expansion, right, of any kind of diversion option they were offering in the past, which I think is a success. And then the working group, even upon launch, will continue to meet probably more frequently at first, and then maybe it'll move to like quarterly. But there has been verbal commitments once we came up with some decisions that we could revisit those after it's operational to see maybe it makes sense to only do certain charges because we're seeing, data-based reasons to pursue one thing over another, or maybe it's an expansion because trust has been developed or interest has been piqued. We're also anticipating that once this is operational, and then I'll be quiet so Ciara can continue, is like in our discussions, because we've been planning this diversion thing, other things have come up where it's like, oh, but what about this case where this victim really wanted to do it, but it was like on a case that would never have been screened eligible. And we're like totally open to like an RJ process being part of that person's plan, even though it's not diversion. But like right now, we want to get this up and going because that was the grant funded, goals and operations.
Thank you.
And Amy, really quick before I continue, I feel like Scott and Sarah's questions were getting at this a little bit. Anyone who's eligible is offered it, is that correct? Or does the prosecutor have the final say? I know we've talked about this.
So there could be, like I said, what we're anticipating to be a small number of cases where victim services gets a strong objection, right, from a victim. So that could happen. Otherwise, I mean, right now we're working on the good faith agreement, right? That the prosecutor's screening. Certainly we're going to be checking in, I guess, about how that goes or yeah, so everything is running through, so we don't have access to look at like charges coming in from our like service provider end of things. We're relying upon the screening to happen when the prosecutor's looking at charges. So theoretically, the vast majority of those people would be offered it, and then it would be up to them and probably their discussion with defense if they're going that route.
Perfect. Will you go to the next slide for me, please? All right, so just really kind of summarizing what was on that last slide and framing in a different way. The things we really want to look at, especially with the surveys, are participant change. So the responsive party, harm party, a pre-survey at intake, and a post-survey, largely about attitudes, well-being, things of that nature. And then program effectiveness, which I am going to talk more about in just a minute. And that is the responsible party pre-survey, including surveys that we're doing right now with our comparison group, as well as possible future comparison groups. As Amy mentioned, the victim veto part is kind of a little flexible right now, but in theory, if someone fills out a survey and then the case doesn't go through or they decide not to, we'll have comparison groups that we can work with that way, and then comparing it with recidivism later down the line. And then the community conference, so looking at the experience of anyone involved, the responsible party, harm party, community reps, the facilitator, and then evaluating through conference documentation as well. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to focus on the program effectiveness in particular. So our comparison groups that we're really looking to establish are the pre-launch group that Amy and Carly are gathering for us currently. And that's the standard process before the program even exists. So these individuals don't have the opportunity to opt in, but they might have the motivation or they would opt in if we had the program up and running. Then the participants is the main group, right, of the responsible party. So they're going through the restorative justice program. And then we have the matched pre and post surveys for them. And then the victim veto group, as I mentioned, they are individuals who are eligible and might be motivated. They fill out the survey, but they're not included or removed by a victim veto. So we're definitely going to have the pre-launch group and the participants, and then the victim veto is kind of as we go, what we are able to gather. So Amy, if you want to go to the next slide. And it's kind of why comparison groups matter. There's a lot of value to the pre and post test just within a program, right? Do we see a change in attitudes and well-being from a participant at the start of the program versus the end of the program? But the comparison group really gets at an area that's more difficult if you don't have just a randomized control trial, which is really hard to do when you have a program that a lot of people want to do, to just tell people they aren't able to do it, but still try and get data from them. And so this court starting really gave us an opportunity to have those pre-surveys. And it's an area that is not as well captured in the restorative justice literature, um, really getting at that causality of the restorative justice. So you have the treatment condition, the restorative justice program there at the bottom, and then you have these confounding factors, which could be multiple things, motivation being one of them to do the restorative justice program. And that those confounding factors, that motivation ties into selection bias. So who gets into the program and who does the program. So if you were to compare to individuals who were eligible for the program but chose not to do it, you have a sort of confounding factor of a motivation to do the program itself. And then that also affects the outcome. We're really trying to measure the outcomes of the program, in particular recidivism. Um, and so while a pre and post survey really gets at attitude changes, this is able to get more at, are we seeing a recidivism outcome change with individuals who go through the program, really controlling for those confounding factors. So if you want to go to the next slide. So what we are doing, there's a few different ways. As I mentioned, randomized control trial is the gold standard, is always the term used with it. And so we're using something called propensity score matching, where you're essentially not creating, you're pairing essentially a statistical twin from a comparison group with a participant. So you're matching them statistically on a number of characteristics like their age, charges, criminal history, survey. And then when you apply propensity score matching, it essentially evens them out and gets rid of those outside factors as much as possible. So when you then compare recidivism later on, you are able to more confidently say that the program had that effect on the individual. And so you're really just comparing similar people so that the groups only differ by the program itself. And so it really points to the program and not the person themselves and their motivation to complete the program. Next slide. And I'm happy to get more into the stats if you'd like. But in terms of just kind of summarizing what we're doing for the data, our next steps, in terms of evaluation of actually, I also want to say, it's not just an evaluation in and of itself, it's really setting Amy and Carly up for data collection on their own. They don't, I mean, they're doing the data collection themselves. They don't need me for largely a lot of this. And it is something that they're looking to continue on even when I'm not in the picture, because you're really able to track your program well, and participant outcomes, and set yourself up for future evaluations, or have that data ready when you want to do more things with it as well. The evaluator in me just is referring to them as evaluation metrics. But we're looking at whether the program changed responsible party and or harm party attitudes and well-being. That's that pre-post survey. Whether the program reduced recidivism compared to those who went through court as usual. And so that is our matching of people who are pre-program and go through the program, and then how the responsible party, harm party, facilitators, and community reps experience the process through that survey after the community conference. So as we've kind of talked about, and Amy talked about as well, we're currently collecting that baseline comparison group. And then the next step is program launch and kind of ongoing data collection to give us some stuff later this year.
I have a question. To go way far back, can somebody explain to me what municipal court is, maybe comparatively to other courts that I would know about, and then sort of what tends to be the cases in them, maybe? That's question number one.
Yeah, I feel like the that's a great question because it's not like every municipality has a municipal court. So it's definitely like within the jurisdiction of Beaverton proper. It's only misdemeanor cases, so a municipal court cannot hear a felony charge. And what else did you have? Oh, well, so to give you an example, because we started like a lot of charges could be potentially eligible, but because we just started that screening the last 3 weeks, right? So we're getting the preview. Um, the charges that I've seen thus far in terms of like screened eligibility, which may give us indication, and we'll continue to like see that over the coming weeks. But there's a lot of theft cases. We've seen a couple hit and run cases, a harassment charge. So that's probably some of the typical charges that we might see.
With that, your responsible parties, offenders, defendants, would any of them been being seen from jail or be coming from jail, or they tend to not be at their arraignments at municipal court?
Um, that's a good question. I know that what do you want to say? In terms of like jail time, like connected to municipal court cases, I know if any like that the maximum is like 364 days in terms of like any sentencing. I think that's probably like also unusual in terms of that level. I don't know if anybody was like held and then showed at their arraignment. Like I said, I've only experienced a few of them thus far. I haven't seen anybody like appear like on video or something like that. Um, yeah. I'm imagining if there was like a strong like public safety reason why someone was being detained, they might not have been screen eligible for our programming, but yeah, I don't quite know the answer to that question. I do know, interestingly enough, and I could probably share this slide deck with you if you're interested, but our presiding municipal court judge did like municipal court 101 like with our RJ facilitators and community reps to give them like a better context of this is the backdrop by which we'll be receiving these referrals. And that was really cool because she did like a more broad comparison between like circuit court and municipal court and like how Multnomah County doesn't have a municipal court. Everything runs through circuit court, and just kind of these different jurisdictions and how they do it. Probably some of these people on this call could articulate. I don't want to try to regurgitate some of the things she said because I'll shamefully mess it up, but yeah, I think the high level things to know is we're talking about Beaverton itself as a city, and we're talking about misdemeanor charges. There are kind of like things that can stack and lead you to a felony charge. So we're hoping that through dismissal of cases, we're actually like helping, people in a legal sense, right? And what was else I was going to say? Oh, we're also not taking so municipal court also like if you got like a speeding violation, they also have a whole category of like violations that go through their court, but we're not like dealing with those in the yeah, we're dealing with misdemeanor charges.
I have a couple more questions if I can, or if anybody. I was just wondering, are you all doing any kind of, I know a lot of the programs have implemented age ranges or are you not doing that at all with this particular one?
No age restrictions. I mean, this will be adult cases because just the way our county works, theoretically, like a municipal court could see a younger person, but the way that it works, at least for us, or maybe it's statewide, but all that would be like juvenile department stuff. I mean, we could see, in older teen come through, but we don't have, I know like a few of the programs we visited were like 19 to 25, still trying to get the like your brain's not fully formed. I will be curious kind of what ages we end up with, but we don't have a selection criteria based on age.
Yeah. No, that would be interesting if the data shakes that out. And I did previously work in one of those programs, and I could see certain things pertaining to the age of most of the RPs agreeing to it and things like that might be different if you tend to start drawing older folks or whatever happens, which love all the one last question with the data. I mean, thanks for putting this presentation on. It's been great information. I was just wondering with the ability that you guys have to start offering the pre-surveys, I think they're called, for the responsible parties at this point, is there a reason, yay or nay, to not be able to do that for harm parties, like through victim services? Like, if you had this choice, would you take it? Was there any planning for that or thought of that? I was just wondering.
We are not planning to do it. We're definitely balancing project underway and also wanting to get the court underway. At the same time, I think it's a bit more difficult dealing with the harm party, and we would essentially be having them fill out the survey again 3 months later about how they feel, which could be interesting in and of itself. But yeah, we're definitely focusing just on the responsible party, mostly to pair with that recidivism data.
Thanks for all that.
Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, that was the bulk of what we wanted to share. I think we've been really excited and grateful for the expertise and advisement. I've learned like so much in these last weeks and months working with the research team, and yeah, it's we're like super hopeful that we'll have some meaningful feedback for our program along the way. And we've had to learn to like slow down because we found ourselves with this opportunity. And like, for example, my research naivete, I was like, oh, it's fine because we're going to launch. We have a built-in control group because some people will be eligible, but like opt out because they don't want to do it, right? Or whatever. So I was like, psh, no problem, did it. And then like, our next check-in meeting, we were like, great, so we're ready to launch on X day. And they were like, what? No, like motivation. And I was like, what? So so it's been a great like ongoing learning process for us, and just grateful that we had a small pool of money thanks to CJC funding, and actually like really motivated people who were willing to contract us with as individuals as individuals who happen to have a whole background of expertise with um, their credentials and their day jobs, to give us kind of full confidence in their advice. So yeah, it's been a great push for us to take like more steps in what our program evaluation looks like than what we've done in the past, which, has been, I think, a lift in and of itself, right? To get like pre and post surveys from people. But yeah, it's kind of opened up my eyes to like what we're able to say or not say based on what we collect. And probably in the past, we've falsely attributed or confidently attributed but unknown, right? Some of the assertions that we've made. So, um, and I think too we're like uh, very lucky that the court folks, because of their other specialty treatment courts, they're like really on board and actively encouraging people to participate in the survey collection. So I think that's been, lucky as well.
And we've had good response on the survey collection so far. I mean, even myself, I'm like, we're asking people to fill out a survey for a program that they can't do. And I think, Amy, everyone who's been asked has filled it out.
I think we had one person decline to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get 35, but yeah, it's been a fun experience as a researcher too, because usually I come in and kind of puzzle together data sometimes or see what you're working with and then go from there, which is very fun in and of itself. But it was an interesting and fun experience too to just kind of work with Amy and Carly and everyone to sort of say what we plan it from the get-go. And I think it'll really contribute to restorative justice literature broadly. Like Amy said, usually it's comparison groups within the court or just pre-post tests, which definitely have value. Um, just yeah, the having a more rigorous comparison group is exciting, I think. And thank you all for letting me join today.
Yeah, I think maybe before we thank you all for your time and cede back the remainder, I am curious, Scott, I know you asked that question, tongue in cheek, like how'd you crack the follow-up? Or well, to be determined. We'll probably be drying our eyes like our prior history, right, of trying to get follow-ups. But I would be curious, like, if you all have any like learnings to share from your own like survey collection, you know, things that have worked, things that have maybe not worked so well. Any like words to the wise, just for benefit of us, to the benefit of the group, because maybe you all have cracked something.
I don't really have any answers, but maybe a little bit input. That was part of the impetus of why I asked the age question. So for my own very small amount of experience, I was typically working with 18 to 25-year-olds. Most of the harm parties that were involved were similar ages, interestingly enough, definitely under 40. So my findings were a lot of times once they were done, that was immediate. And I just wondered if that sometimes had to do with age, so I could not get out of the room fast enough, not really interested in follow up unless it was maybe connect for a direct service or just a hello or whatever. So I guess, yeah, I say all that to say I will be interested if you find the different segments of the population, maybe do the follow up, multiple ways to offer it, maybe, of course, digitally or in person or things like that were some things we tried. Could just be societal. I don't know. Anybody else?
The only thing that comes to mind, I think it's a great innovation to have that. I don't know if you call it a graduation circle or celebration circle or something like that. That because at a lot of programs, not only the 3 month follow-up or 6 month follow-up, but just the post, like right at the end of it, is hard to collect as completely as you'd want. And especially if it's a pre-post with some matched items,
Hmm.
uh, it's a pretty high value on that. So just yeah, setting the expectation that there's this event that just marks the end of it, I think gives the opportunity to be a lot more successful about collecting that way. I remember at CDR when I would get a new intern, the first thing they would do is just scroll through our case management system and see all the places where the final survey was missing and see if they could get anybody on the phone.
Yeah.
Uh, and they'd get two or three, and then 6 months later, somebody else would take a crack at it. And so, yeah, it can be can be tough, but I'm really also it's a kind of a stroke of brilliance to start collecting data on who would be eligible before the launch. I don't think I've seen that done before, but that's a pretty clever twist on trying to find a comparison group. And seems like it ought to be replicable as we hear about other folks that are going to launch anything new. We ought to be able to drop that tidbit for them. And yeah, it's good.
Yeah, definitely. And there's other ways to kind of get at the comparison groups, but it's definitely an exciting way. And then for
Yeah,
the 3 month follow-up, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, just the guy at the CJC who we talked to a couple times who does a lot of the stats and reports was like he was really just talking about that statistical twinning stuff, and that sounded like tedious. Yeah. I don't even know if it's realistic, but even if it is, it's tedious.
Yeah,
He
because
says
maybe
they
like
he
the
says they can do it.
historical match
Yeah. Yeah.
is one of the ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to learn. And Chris Campbell, who we're working with, actually was the one who taught me because he is like the expert of experts in it. So um yeah, yeah, but for the long-term match, something we've talked about, but is definitely always there's barriers to it too, is just offering, since we're just going to be reaching out to people for that final possible follow-up, if we can get it, are some sort of incentive or joining a raffle or something like that. But there's always limitations of funding and where you can spend your money and everything. So we've been playing around with that idea.
I know we have so many financial hurdles to just like buying grocery store gift cards. You know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, how is this the reality that we're facing, right? In terms of yeah, like the easy incentive stuff that everybody like could use or appreciate, right? So yeah, we're still brainstorming around that of what that could look like, that we could make like financially happen.
Does the program, sorry, just to get clarification, who owns the program in the city? Is it the court? Is it your team? Is it prosecution? Like who actually is responsible? It's you guys. Okay.
Yeah. So we're the service provider. I know it's confusing because we're all like city staff. We're the service provider. It just so happens that our referral partner has been involved with us from the jump. So we've made all these like we made the working group and like a lot of collaborative decisions. Um, but all the funding has been received by us. It's actually not going to any court operations at all. They generously made the decision when we put in the grant application that they, at least currently, we'll see how they feel once we launch, right? And the additional workload it may make. But right now, they're seeing this as like business as usual in terms of how they are doing their things. Although obviously it's creating work for them in terms of like new screening and, you know, court staff having to tweak their systems to create, different things. I know it's like funny how you can get so in the weeds, like, oh, someone's going to sign up for an orientation session at arraignment when they and we're like, how are we going to know that they, right? And like all the background tools and, IT, whatever that has to be created in order to spit out a report for us that says someone's coming 2 Wednesdays from now, right? For orientation. But yeah. But we're the CJC grant recipient. We're the RJ practitioner side of stuff.
And I think I already heard you guys, but so for example, our prosecution is contracted. We don't have, I think you said that their or not prosecution, I'm sorry, defense. You said their defense are they through the consortium or are they contracted through the court? Do you know?
What's I've heard them say like contracted, like we don't have city staff that are
No, so indigent
what's
defense.
the concern?
And the reason I'm asking is indigent defense would be the defense attorneys that are not city employees. They wouldn't be here. Prosecution is usually city
Right.
because they're protecting, they're defending law enforcement. The reason I ask that is because I'm wondering if the defense firm is under is it a contracted firm through the court? Like our indigent defense is our contractors to the court, and we pay them. Some areas have a consortium and it's different, more similar to the state. And so the reason I was asking that is, for example, when we do programs, and that's why I was asking the budget, oftentimes, depending on what the impact is to indigent defense, they want more money because it is more time to put in. And so that's why I was asking, because I was wondering the backwards of that question was indigent defense asking you guys yet at this point for more money in their contract or an increase to how much they're getting paid? Because a lot of times with programs, there's additional time put in based on what their normal expectation is on supporting a case and how they're getting paid out on a case.
Great question. So I could check and get you more details about that. I know they contract with defense, but I don't know if it's a consortium or individuals or kind of how that works. Um,
But you're not paying them more money right now.
no, right now they definitely won't be getting any money out of this grant allocation that we've received because that wasn't in the mix. But I guess we'll see going forward. We'll start to probably have more interaction with defense attorneys. One of the defense attorneys that's been connected to municipal court and is actually heavily involved in one of their treatment courts and wanted to be a part of this planning process, who's been giving us a lot of input. We've had a lot of contact with her, and then we did like a presentation and outreach when the municipal court had one of their quarterly roundups with a lot of the common defense attorneys that they work with. So we gave them a preview that it's coming, but since we haven't launched yet, but we'll be doing that in the fall, because we've decided that we're very committed to getting these eligible, but not yet programmatically able to be serviced individual surveys. I guess we'll be starting to hear from defense, right? And how much they're on board, or if there's pushback about, time up front that they're having with the client, maybe to be answering questions or something like that.
Yeah, I was just, and that really answered it. It was more just, I was trying to find out if you guys are having to pay anything to them at this point. So that's good information. So I appreciate that.
And I believe, Amy, it's contracted, but I don't want to falsely lead.
That's the impression that I got, because I know the defense attorney that is on our working group, I believe through my conversations with her, I've gathered that she's like an individual who's contracted. But I don't know how that works on the back end.
And I think, the program hasn't been started yet, but compared to some diversion programs, I think yours requires a little less involvement from the defense attorney than others, possibly, but I haven't seen it in action yet. So
yeah, I would imagine if they're, I mean, who's to say? We'll see. But I'm imagining, that the defense attorneys, even though we've done this presentation, right, and provided them information, I'm sure once it's actually launched, they'll be like, wait, what? Right? So there might be more FaceTime with them calling us as program staff, or who knows, maybe they're even going to show up to the orientation session with their client. We'll learn soon enough. Or what's the diversity, right? Is it just I'm seeing the same, 5 defense attorneys over and over again listed on cases, or am I dealing with like, oh my gosh, every other week there's a new person, right, who doesn't know what this is about?
Yeah, I was gonna say I would because depending on how they are paid, just more of like a heads up, because we have a lot of programs too, and I'm the court administrator, I negotiate the contracts, and I used to be Sherry's position, which was over the programs. Is that it's really going to depend on how they're paid, and if they're paid on time to disposition by case, I imagine that you will hear, because it's not that it's less work, it's the time and order, a time to the time that they get paid. So if the
Gotcha.
6 months to dispo, they're not getting paid for 6 months, even though they're having to work with that case. So a lot of times there becomes a flat fee and a flat rate, depending on if they work with a big firm and then a few extra attorneys, conflict attorneys, or individual. But yeah, that's what I was asking, because our firm's so well versed, that would be like the first thing they would ask us, is because we used to pay by dispo by case, and because we have so many programs, we went to a salary because we had individual and program fee. But we're very fortunate that we have a very large firm now, one, and then just a few conflicts. So we're really just negotiating with one firm normally. But anyway, money is always comes up, unfortunately. And so that's why I was curious, because that and prosecution are typically the two that are partners wise that we have to kind of engage. One last question, sorry, that I didn't hear much about is how much, or maybe at a later time, talk about law enforcement support around this in your area and how much involvement. I know that they were part of the work group, I think, at the beginning, but is there any involvement or anything you guys ran into with them supporting this program? Because they're obviously citing, it sounds like they don't get to, like, for example, sometimes programs they cite directly to the program date, but this one, it sounds like prosecution does rounds up and gives. Have you heard if there's any support around them, or concerns, or I guess just involvement? Yeah.
Yeah. So to clarify, the police has not been a part of our like working group, but they've been receiving updates. Like normally our prosecutor has been keeping them up to speed because he communicates with them about a bunch of other things. But we did have like robust debates on, are we doing diversion or deflection, but it felt like the people that we had at the table who were already kind of bought in and motivated, right, were pushing us towards like starting with diversion, and then maybe down the road we can reestablish. So we certainly we've had like discussions, working group members with police, and I think right now they're just kind of like, well, I don't think this really changes like what we're doing at our level. So I think they're just like probably in a state of just like, oh, okay, you're doing that. We'll see, right, when it actually launches, if there's like more feedback that any of us are hearing. I think like, from some of the programs that we visited, sometimes there was officer involvement, like an officer might opt in to like participate in like a community conference or something like that. So some of the programs I know after they were up and running did more intentional, um what do you want to say, like relationship building and things with like police. And actually one of the programs, if I remember correctly, was like designating like a few officers. Maybe they weren't even like the arresting or citing officers, but like who were like, oh, I'm gonna be like one of the people who gets paid to like go and do this RJ thing. But I know that was like big negotiations in terms of personnel and timing and things like that. So maybe down the road that will be something that we'll be able to explore. So I would say like right now we like the relationship is um like like positive, but it's only been like an informative one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And the reason I was just wondering, because yeah, it'll be interesting. I'll be interested to check in with you guys later as the program starts on how they react to recidivism. So people that are going through the program, and then depending on if they reoffend or not, or what that rate is versus support or engagement with the program. That's kind of what I was wondering. Um, and then my last question is maybe sorry, one more question. If people are not compliant, like for example, they opt in, right, and they don't attend um one of their like they don't attend the first session, or are they going to issue warrants on these people?
So we've talked about, and again, this is all theoretical, right? Because we haven't launched with the green light go. But we have talked about like, what do you want to say? The ability for our program to have like multiple attempts, to engage somebody. I think one of the reasons that the court staff are really advocating for us doing these regularly scheduled like orientation sessions was hopefully seeing somebody's motivation to like follow through on the orientation session with the hopes that that would mean like, okay, this person's serious about it and they'll like attend. Trying to mitigate fears that like, let's pretend in a case where like a victim's really interested, right? The further harm created by like the expectation they're in, right? And then they're not showing up. Although, I think as RJ practitioners, we kind of deal with all of that, what do you want to say, variety of the human experience and indecision and nerves and all of that. So we'd be obviously trying to work with what I call the inbounds hesitations that I think are part of the human experience, as opposed to like the hesitations that are, I would tell them I would do it again, where you're like, oh, not ready to come together. Okay. Um, so yeah, but in terms of like the non-compliance, so we have talked about like, at some point there may be like in certain cases where we have to come back to our court partners and say like, well, we haven't been able to make contact, or, okay, they missed one with a reasonable excuse, but we've reset and rescheduled with everyone, right? Is this happening repeatedly, or what's going on? Then it may have to go back to whatever business as usual looks like in the court.
Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of that specific question about like, would they be putting out a warrant for their arrest or something like that? Like, I don't know what their process like looks like. I could be able to speak to that, but yeah. All right. Well, Michael, I don't know if you want to kick it back to you for any wrap up, or if you have anything you wanted to um, conclude with.
Yeah, not a question, just a comment. I think what y'all did with this is really cool. I learned a lot today, so appreciate y'all for sharing what you've done and what you will continue to do with this. If you didn't catch it earlier, I recorded it. I'll put it on YouTube at later tonight, and we can share it with colleagues and anyone that might benefit from viewing this presentation. So again, thank you. Thank you everyone for showing up. And if there's no more questions, we can hop off mute and say goodbye to everyone.
Hi, thank you so
Thanks, you
much.
too.
Thanks.
Great
That was great.
presentation.
See ya.
Bye.